folks need to leave right now.
Officer, we're just eating lunch. We just ordered. What do we do?
I've had complaints you're causing a disturbance. You need to vacate the premises.
A disturbance? We're sitting here with our kids. Who complained?
That's not your concern. Leave voluntarily or this becomes an arrest situation.
It had been a beautiful Friday evening in Savannah, Georgia, the kind of southern evening that makes you feel like everything in the world might actually be okay. Dr. James Caldwell, 41, a pediatric surgeon at St. Joseph's Children's Hospital, had promised his family a proper sit-down dinner after a long week. His wife, Patricia, 39, had spent the week buried in depositions and back-to-back client calls. Nathan had just won his school science fair. Sophia had finally finished the chapter book she'd been working on for 3 weeks. It felt like a night worth celebrating, and Magnolia Table, a beloved Savannah institution famous for its southern comfort food and warm, welcoming atmosphere, seemed like the perfect place to do it. They'd driven through the historic district with the windows slightly down, the evening air carrying that particular mix of jasmine and salt that Savannah does better than anywhere else in the country. When they arrived, they were seated without issue near a window that looked out onto cobblestone streets lined with Spanish moss. They ordered sweet tea and lemonade, looked over the menu together, let the kids weigh in on appetizers, and settled into exactly the kind of easy, unhurried family time that the whole week had been building toward. Nathan was sketching. Sophia was reading. James and Patricia were finally genuinely relaxing. And then something shifted. A couple at a nearby table had begun to stare. Not the brief, accidental kind of glance that happens in a crowded restaurant. A deliberate, sustained, un confortable stare. Patricia noticed it first. She said nothing, simply reached across the table and rested her hand over her husband's. He looked up, caught her eyes, understood immediately, and looked back down at the menu. They had been in this moment before. Not this restaurant, not this city, but this exact moment, the one where you realize that to someone nearby, your family's presence is being treated as a problem. They chose, as they had always chosen, to meet it with dignity. They ordered their food. They talked with their kids. They stayed. But the couple across the room had already stood up, walked deliberately to the front of the restaurant, and were now speaking in low, urgent tones to a young hostess near the entrance. 5 minutes later, the front doors swung open, and Officer Daniel Marsh walked in. Marsh was a 12-year veteran of the Savannah Police Department. His colleagues described him as efficient, no nonsense, someone who got calls handled quickly and moved on. What his personnel file described was something more complicated. 9 prior complaints over a decade, every single one involving a minority family or individual in a public space. Every single one quietly closed by internal affairs as either unfounded or inconclusive. Marsh had learned, the way some officers do, exactly how to operate within the system's blind spots. As long as he could point to a business owner's request or a citizen complaint as justification, the department would close ranks around him. He had never once faced meaningful consequences. He walked into Magnolia Table that Friday evening completely confident. His body camera, standard issue and department mandated, clicked on automatically the moment he stepped out of his patrol car, as policy required. He didn't think twice about it. He scanned the warm, busy dining room, a full house of families and couples enjoying their Friday night, and without pausing, without speaking to a manager, without asking a single question of the staff, he walked in a straight, purposeful line directly toward the only black family in the restaurant. Everything that followed was recorded. "Sir, I'm going to need you and your family to leave right now." Dr. Caldwell looked up with the measured stillness of a man who has spent years delivering difficult news to parents in hospital hallways and has learned that panic helps no one. "Officer, we're just having dinner. We just ordered. We haven't done anything." His hand moved instinctively to Nathan's shoulder, the quiet, automatic gesture of a father placing himself between his child and something threatening. "I've had a complaint that you're causing a disturbance. You need to vacate the premises." Patricia's legal instincts kicked in even as her heart was hammering. "A disturbance? We're sitting here with our children. Who complained? What specifically did they say we did?" The body camera captured every word of Marsh's response, the casual dismissiveness of it, the way he said, "That's not your concern," as though a mother asking why her family was being removed from a restaurant was an unreasonable question. "Leave voluntarily," he said, "or this becomes an arrest situation." Sophia had stopped reading. She was looking at her mother now, and the confusion on her 7-year-old face, the way she was trying to understand why a police officer was standing over their dinner table speaking to her parents this way, was captured in perfect clarity by the camera on Marsh's chest. Nathan had gone very still. Dr. Caldwell's voice, steady until this moment, finally cracked. "We paid for our food. We haven't done anything wrong. Please, can you just tell us what someone said we did?" What happened next is the part of this story that people tend to remember. From the back of the restaurant, through the kitchen's swinging door, came a voice that silenced the entire room. "Daniel, what in the world is going on out here?" Eleanor Hutchins, 64, had owned Magnolia Table for 22 years. She was a Savannah institution in the truest sense of the word. During Hurricane Matthew, she kept her kitchen running around the clock, feeding relief workers and displaced families for free. She had a framed quote above her kitchen pass-through, handwritten in her own script, that read simply, "Everyone eats here." She had hired people that other restaurants wouldn't look at twice, had hosted community fundraisers, had personally delivered meals to elderly residents in her neighborhood every Thanksgiving for 15 years. She was not, in any version of any universe, the kind of woman who called the police on a family for having dinner. She walked straight past Officer Marsh as though he were a piece of furniture that had been moved to an inconvenient location, stopped at the Caldwell family's table, and looked at them with an expression that was equal parts apology and resolve. "Dr. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell, I am so sorry. Please don't move. Your food will be out in 10 minutes, and tonight your meal is on the house." Then she turned to Marsh, and her voice, still warm, carried the particular firmness of someone who has been running her own establishment for more than 2 decades and has never once been unclear about who is in charge of it. "These are my customers, Daniel. Nobody on my staff called you, and I certainly did not. So I need you to tell me right now who called and what exactly did they say this family did." Marsh pointed toward a table near the window. A couple reported that they were causing a disturbance. Eleanor looked at the empty table. "That couple left 3 minutes ago," she said quietly. "And even if they were still sitting right there, I do not remove paying customers from my restaurant because someone nearby is uncomfortable. That is not something I do. That is not something this restaurant does." She stepped slightly forward, positioning herself gently, but unmistakably between the officer and the Caldwell family. "These children are just trying to have dinner with their parents. Let them eat." The restaurant was completely silent. Then from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap, slowly at first, then joined by another and another, until the entire dining room was applauding, not loudly or dramatically, but with the quiet, genuine warmth of people who had just witnessed something true. Marsh's report, filed at the end of his shift, told a completely different story. He wrote that he had responded to a legitimate disturbance call, that the family had been disruptive, and that they had left voluntarily after he explained the situation. He made no mention of Eleanor Hutchins. He made no mention of his threats. He made no mention of the fact that the family had remained seated and had done nothing wrong from the moment they arrived to the moment he left. It was a carefully constructed fiction. But there was one thing Marsh had not accounted for. His own body camera had been recording from the moment he stepped out of his patrol car, and unlike his written report, that footage could not be edited, reworded, softened, or spun. When the Caldwell family filed their formal complaint 4 days later, Patricia, having documented the entire interaction on her own phone as well, Internal Affairs was required to review all available evidence. What they found on that body camera contradicted Marsh's report at every single point. The video showed a peaceful family. It showed children who were reading and drawing. It showed a father's hand on his son's shoulder. It showed a mother wiping her eyes and trying to hold herself together in front of her kids. It showed an officer who had walked past an entire restaurant full of people to single out the one black family without asking a single question first. And it showed Eleanor Hutchins, centered perfectly in the frame, telling that officer to let a family finish their dinner. Civil rights attorneys filed a Freedom of Information request for all of Marsh's body camera footage from business disturbance calls over the prior 3 years. What they found was staggering. Of the 76 such calls Marsh had responded to, 61 had involved complaints about people of color. The footage revealed a consistent and unmistakable pattern: the same immediate targeting, the same absence of any investigation before confrontation, the same threats, the same outcomes. Even more troubling, in 10 of the cases where discrimination complaints had later been filed against Marsh, his body camera had not been activated, leaving no record of interactions that multiple witnesses described as openly discriminatory. Investigators then uncovered a series of internal emails between Marsh and his supervising lieutenant discussing how to handle calls from business owners concerned about guests who made their other customers uncomfortable. The language was careful. The intent was not. The United States Attorney's Office opened a federal civil rights investigation. This was not prosecutors determined a single bad day. This was a system operating quietly and consistently over years, enabled by departmental silence and protected by paperwork. Marsh was charged under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, and 18 U.S.C. Section 241, conspiracy to deprive civil rights. His supervising lieutenant was charged as a co-conspirator. 41 other individuals who had been removed or threatened by Marsh over the years were identified and contacted. 41 people who had done nothing wrong and had never received so much as an acknowledgement that what happened to them was real. The federal trial lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutors played Marsh's body camera footage on a large courtroom monitor, and the jury watched in silence as a family sat peacefully at a dinner table while an officer told them to leave. They watched Sophia lower her book. They watched Nathan go still. They watched Dr. Caldwell's hand find his son's shoulder. They watched Eleanor Hutchins walk out of her kitchen and stand between a uniformed officer and 2 children who were just trying to eat. Then prosecutors played footage from 16 other incidents. Then 41 victims took the stand. Then statistical experts testified that the pattern in Marsh's enforcement history was mathematically impossible to attribute to coincidence. The defense argued that Marsh had simply been responding to complaints, doing his job. The body camera footage made that argument impossible to sustain. The jury deliberated for 2 days. The verdict was guilty on all counts. Marsh was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months in federal prison. His lieutenant, who pleaded guilty before trial, received 16 months. The civil lawsuit filed by the Caldwell family settled for $1.6 million, with additional mandated reforms, including independent civilian oversight of the department, mandatory bias training with regular accountability testing, strict body camera activation requirements with real consequences for noncompliance, and a $400,000 compensation fund established for the 41 other victims. Eleanor Hutchins put a new sign in the window of Magnolia Table the week after the verdict. It read, in her own handwriting, "All are welcome here. No exceptions." Business at the restaurant increased substantially in the months that followed, filled with customers who wanted to sit in the dining room, where a woman had once looked a uniformed officer in the eye and said, simply, "Let them eat." The Caldwell family used a portion of their settlement to establish the Caldwell Equal Access Fund, providing legal representation to discrimination victims across Georgia who couldn't afford to fight back on their own. Nathan, now old enough to understand more of what happened that evening, wrote about it for a school assignment. He said that the thing he remembered most wasn't the fear, though he remembered that too. What he remembered most was Eleanor coming through that kitchen door. He wrote that it taught him that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is just refuse to move. Officer Daniel Marsh served his sentence and was released. He never apologized to the Caldwell family. He never apologized to any of the 41 other people his body camera had helped expose. He maintained, to the end, that he had simply been doing his job. The body camera that recorded everything, his own department-issued equipment, designed specifically to protect officers from false accusations, had instead become the primary evidence of his systematic abuse of authority. His own device. His own footage, his own undoing. Body cameras, it turns out, work both ways. They protect officers who act with integrity, and they document, with ruthless precision, those who do not. When Daniel Marsh walked into Magnolia Table that Friday evening, he was confident, protected, and certain that what he was about to do was something he had done dozens of times before without consequence. But a little girl had put down her book to watch. A little boy had gone still at the table. A mother was trying not to cry in front of her children. A father's hand was on his son's shoulder. And a woman named Eleanor had just pushed open a kitchen door. And all of it, every single second of it, was being recorded.